At the close of a royal day, as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of lavender and rose, a quiet transformation begins. Within the great palaces and castles of Europe, the vibrant energy of the court, the murmur of ambition, the rustle of silk gowns, the distant echo of state affairs, gently recedes. The grand halls of power, which for hours have been stages for governance and society, slowly empty and fall silent. The footsteps on the marble floors become fewer, their echoes softer. The clamor of the kitchens, the bustle of the stables, shouts of the guards in the courtyards, all these sounds of a living, working palace begin to fade into a low, distant hum. This is the moment when the public day ends and the private evening commences. It is a transition not marked by clocks or grand announcements, but by a subtle shift in the atmosphere.
Act.
The light softens, the sounds become more distant, and the very air seems to grow still. It is in this gentle twilight that a different kind of ceremony unfolds, one far removed from the public eye. This is not a ceremony of state, but one of sanctuary. A series of quiet, ordered rituals, each one carefully designed not for politics or for show, but for one simple, profoundly human purpose: to create an atmosphere of deep and abiding peace, and to ensure a night of tranquil, restorative rest. It was a slow, deliberate unwinding, a masterpiece of comfort and care perfected over generations. A gentle art form practiced in the most private of chambers. Tonight, we journey back in time, past the gilded gates and behind the velvet curtains, to explore how the royalty of ages past perfected the art of repose. This is a serene journey into their calming night rituals, a story told through the beautiful and tranquil surroundings they created, the soothing and natural scents they curated, the gentle and comforting nourishment they enjoyed, and the quiet, contemplative pastimes that soothed the mind and prepared the soul for sleep. We will not concern ourselves with the great dramas of history, with crowns, or with conflicts. Instead, our focus will be on the small sensory details that defined these quiet hours. We will feel the warmth of the fire, smell the faint, honeyed scent of beeswax candles, and hear the soft whisper of linen sheets. We will discover a world where comfort was a craft, where tranquility was a treasure, and where the final moments of the day were dedicated to creating a perfect haven from the world. Join us as we explore the gentle art of a royal repose. Our journey into the royal repose begins with the room itself, the bedchamber. To understand the profound importance of its nightly preparation, we must first understand the nature of the buildings it was in. A palace of the 17th or 18th century, whether it be the sprawling grandeur of Versailles, the Tudor intricacy of Hampton Court, or the stark magnificence of the Escorial in Spain, was a feat of engineering and artistry. But it was not, by any modern measure, a comfortable place. These were structures of stone, marble, and glass. Materials chosen for their permanence and grandeur, not for their warmth. The corridors were vast and echoing, the ceilings soared to incredible heights, and the windows, often single panes of imperfect glass, were notoriously drafty. During the day, this immensity conveyed power. But as night fell, and the chill of the evening air began to seep through the stone walls, the palace could become a cold and impersonal place. And so the first and most vital ritual of the royal evening was the transformation of the bedchamber from a grand space into a warm, quiet, and deeply personal haven. This was a battle against the cold, fought with fire, fabric, and a meticulous attention to detail. The heart of this effort was the fireplace. It was almost always immense. A cavern of carved stone or marble, perhaps fine Carrara marble from Italy, or a richly colored local stone, and its preparation for the night was a science. The process began with clearing the hearth of the day's ashes using a brass shovel and a birch twig broom. Then the servants would place the andirons two heavy ornate iron supports, sometimes topped with polished brass globes, or cast into the shape of lions in position. These were not merely decorative. They served the crucial function of lifting the logs off the hearth floor, allowing air to circulate underneath, which resulted in a better draft and a more efficient, less smoky fire. Upon these andirons, the fire was built. The choice of wood was paramount. For a long, slow, and consistent heat that would last through the night, dense hardwoods were required. Oak, beech, and ash, all properly seasoned for at least a year to reduce their moisture content, were the preferred choice. Green, unseasoned wood would hiss and spit, producing billows of irritating smoke that could quickly fill the chamber. For a touch of olfactory luxury, a log of apple or cherry wood might be added to the fire. As it burned, it would release a faint, sweet, and pleasant fragrance into the air. Behind the fire, leaning against the back wall of the hearth, was a vital piece of technology. The fireback. This was a thick, heavy slab of cast iron, often decorated with a coat of arms, a biblical scene, or a mythological motif. Made in the great iron foundries of Sussex or the Ardennes, it would absorb an immense amount of heat. Long after the flames had died down to glowing embers, the fireback would continue to radiate a gentle, steady warmth back into the room, acting as a primitive but effective storage heater that helped maintain a comfortable temperature through the coldest hours of the night. With the fire established as the room's warm heart, the next task was to defend the chamber from its greatest enemy, the draught. The primary point of entry was the windows. To combat this, a layered defense was employed. First, heavy interior shutters crafted from solid oak or walnut and often carved with intricate patterns were closed and latched. These provided the first physical barrier against the cold air seeping through the glass. But the main defense was fabric. The window curtains in a royal bedchamber were not the light decorative panels of today. They were fortifications of textile, were often 2 or even 3 distinct layers. Closest to the glass might hang a fine curtain of muslin or linen, primarily for daytime privacy. But the true work was done by the main curtains. These were immensely heavy, often made from Genoese velvet, a fabric so dense it felt like fur, or a rich silk damask from lion, its woven patterns adding another layer of thickness. These were not simply hung, they were lined, typically with a thick, rugged wool fabric known as serge or baize, adding yet another layer of insulation. When these curtains were drawn using a system of elaborate cords and pulleys, their sheer weight and density created a nearly impenetrable barrier to the cold. They would hang from floor to ceiling, their opulent folds pooling on the floor in a deliberate display of wealth known as puddling, which also ensured that no stray draft could sneak in from below. The cold stone walls were the next frontier to be tamed. The most effective solution was the tapestry. We think of them now as priceless works of art, but in their time, they were equally valued as insulation. The great tapestry workshops, like the Gobelins manufactory in Paris or the workshops of Flanders, produced enormous woven panels that were hung on the walls of important rooms. They were not hung flat against the stone. Instead, they were attached to wooden battens, which created a crucial air gap of an inch or two between the fabric and the wall. This trapped layer of air was a remarkably effective insulator, preventing the room's warmth from being leached away by the cold stone. The subjects of these tapestries were often calm and pleasing. Verdure tapestries depicted lush, green forest landscapes, while others might show scenes from classical mythology or pastoral life. In rooms without tapestries, another solution was employed: intricate wood paneling known in France as boiserie. Walls would be covered in beautifully carved panels of oak or walnut, sometimes painted in soft pastel colors and highlighted with gold leaf. While not as effective as a thick wool tapestry, the wood was a far better insulator than bare stone, and it added a sense of warmth and enclosure to the room. The floors, too, received attention. The polished parquet or cold stone was covered with large, thick carpets imported at great expense from the Ottoman Empire or Persia. These carpets, with their deep pile and dense weave, served two purposes. They were wonderfully soft and warm underfoot, a welcome comfort for a monarch stepping out of bed. They also absorbed sound, dampening echoes, and contributing to the overall sense of quiet and tranquility within the chamber. With the room now sealed, warmed, and softened, the final preparations centered on the bed itself. Here the concept of a sanctuary was taken to its ultimate conclusion. The four-poster bed, with its full set of curtains, was the heart of the haven. These were not sheer decorative curtains. They were made of the same heavy-lined velvet or damask as the window hangings. When the servants ceremoniously drew these curtains for the night, they were enclosing the monarch in a warm, dark, and utterly silent microenvironment. Within this fabric tent, the sleeper was protected from any remaining drafts, from the distracting flicker of the dying fire, and from the vast echoing space of the room itself. It was the final, innermost layer of comfort, a quiet cocoon in the heart of the palace. This nightly ritual of closing out the world and cultivating warmth was a fundamental part of the royal experience. It was a practical necessity that evolved into an art form, a series of deliberate actions that transformed a grand, cold room into an intimate sanctuary. Every closed shutter, every drawn curtain, and every log placed upon the fire was a step in a quiet, comforting procession, leading inevitably toward a night of peaceful and protected repose. Now that the royal bedchamber has been transformed into a warm and quiet sanctuary, our attention turns to a more subtle, yet equally powerful, element of the nightly ritual: the art of scent. Long before the modern concept of aromatherapy was conceived, the royal courts of Europe had an intuitive and sophisticated understanding of how fragrance could shape an environment, soothe the mind, and gently guide the spirit toward rest. The air within the bedchamber was never left to chance. It was carefully and deliberately perfumed, not with the heavy, overpowering sense of public life, but with a symphony of natural, delicate aromas designed to create an atmosphere of pure tranquility. The primary source for this olfactory artistry was the palace's own gardens. Royal gardens were not merely decorative landscapes. They were living libraries of fragrance, meticulously cultivated to provide a constant supply of aromatic plants. The still room, a quiet workspace, often located near the kitchens and gardens, was the heart of this operation. Here, Under the direction of the royal herbalist or a trusted lady of the household, the bounty of the garden was transformed into the tools of tranquility. The most prized products of the still room were floral waters or hydrolats. These were created through the gentle process of steam distillation. In large copper stills, vast quantities of fresh flower petals, damask roses from the palace rosarium, heady orange blossoms from the orangery, or calming lavender from the herb garden were mixed with pure spring water and slowly heated. As the steam passed through the petals, it would become infused with their aromatic oils. This fragrant steam was then channeled through a cooled coil where it condensed back into a liquid. The result was a water imbued with the true delicate essence of the flower. This floral water was a versatile tool in the nightly ritual. It could be decanted into a silver atomizer and sprayed lightly into the air, allowing a fine mist of rose or orange blossom to settle on the heavy velvet curtains and the tapestries, refreshing the room with a scent that was clean and entirely natural. A few spoonfuls might be added to the water in the final basin used for washing the face and hands before bed, leaving a subtle and personal fragrance on the skin. The linens of the royal bed were a primary vehicle for this gentle aromatherapy. When laundered, they were often given a final rinse in water infused with lavender or rose water. Once dried in the sun, they would be carefully folded and stored in large linen presses or chests made from fragrant cedar wood, which naturally repelled moths and imparted its own clean, woodsy scent. Within these chests, the stacks of fine linen sheets and pillowcases were layered with scented sachets. These were small bags, beautifully crafted from silk or fine muslin and tied with ribbons, filled with a carefully chosen blend of dried herbs and flowers. Lavender was nearly always the primary ingredient, universally recognized for its ability to calm the nerves and promote sleep. It was often blended with other botanicals, dried chamomile flowers to enhance its sedative properties, rose petals for a touch of sweetness, and lemon verbena for a hint of clean, citrusy brightness. Sometimes shavings of orris root, the dried rhizome of the iris flower, would be added. Orris root is a remarkable natural fixative. It absorbs and holds onto scents, slowly releasing them over time, ensuring the sachets would perfume the linens for months. As the linens rested in the chest, they would become thoroughly permeated with these gentle scents. When a servant prepared the royal bed for the night, pulling back the fresh sheets, a soft, comforting fragrance would be released into the room, not a perfume that had been applied, but a scent that was an integral part of the fabric itself. To lie down in such a bed was to be enveloped in the essence of a peaceful herb garden. Potpourri offered another method for scenting the chamber. Unlike modern potpourri, which is often artificially scented, the traditional form was a complex, moist blend of botanicals that was cured over weeks or months. In large ceramic jars, layers of semi-dried flowers and herbs would be alternated with salt, which acted as a preservative. Spices like cinnamon, cloves, and allspice, along with citrus peels and a fixative like orris root or benzoin resin, would be added to the mix. The jar would be sealed and left in a cool, dark place to cure, a process that blended the individual scents into a rich, complex, and harmonious whole. Once cured, the potpourri would be placed in ornate, perforated porcelain bowls, allowing its subtle, lasting fragrance to gently perfume the air day and night. Beyond the work of the still room, the fire itself was used as a tool of scent. Tossing a handful of dried rosemary or lavender sprigs onto the hot embers of the dying fire would release a sudden, beautiful puff of aromatic smoke. This practice, known as fumigation, was believed to purify the air while leaving behind a pleasant, lingering fragrance. Similarly, the very woods burned in the fireplace, apple, cherry, or birch contributed their own faint, sweet and smoky notes to the room's complex scent profile. This multi-layered approach ensured that the fragrance of the room was immersive, yet never overpowering. It was a gentle, organic presence, a seamless blend of the clean scent of beeswax, the warm aroma of the wood fire, the subtle perfume of the linens, and the fresh, floral notes from the potpourri and floral waters. It was a carefully composed olfactory landscape, a final, invisible layer of comfort that calmed the senses and signaled to the deepest parts of the mind that this was a place of safety, peace, and rest. With the bedchamber now a warm, quiet, and beautifully scented sanctuary, the final preparations turn inward to the monarch themselves. The public performance of the day, with its magnificent but restrictive clothing, is finally over. The ritual of undressing was not simply about removing clothes. It was a profound act of liberation, a shedding of the physical armor of state to embrace the simple, honest comfort of the night. This transition was embodied by the royal night wardrobe, a collection of garments crafted not for display, but for the purest form of physical ease. The day wardrobe of a European monarch in centuries past was a study in magnificent discomfort. For a queen, it meant layers of heavy silk and brocade, a rigid corset of whalebone that cinched the waist and restricted breathing, and wide panniers that extended the hips. For a king, it involved stiffly tailored coats, high collars, and formal wigs. These were clothes designed to project an image of power, wealth, and unassailable dignity. They were, in essence, a uniform. The nightly ritual began with the methodical removal of this uniform. With the help of trusted servants, the laces of the corset were loosened, and the first full, deep breath of the evening was a quiet moment of pure physical relief. The heavy gowns, the stiff coats, the jewels, and the wigs were all carefully taken away, to be cleaned and prepared for the next day's performance. In their place came the soft, forgiving fabrics of the night. The foundational garment of the night wardrobe was the nightshirt or nightgown, known in France as the chemise de nuit. This was a long, loose-fitting garment, and its primary virtue was the quality of its material. The finest nightgowns were made from incredibly high-quality linen, often imported from Haarlem in the Netherlands or from Ireland. This linen was prized for its unique combination of properties. It was exceptionally soft against the skin, highly breathable, and remarkably durable. It would be bleached to a brilliant snowy white and would only grow softer with each careful laundering. For colder climates or winter months, the linen might be replaced with fine, soft flannel, a woven wool fabric that was brushed to raise the fibers, creating a fluffy, insulating surface that offered gentle warmth without weight. While the cut of the nightgown was simple, its details spoke of its royal status. The neckline and cuffs were often adorned with the most delicate lace, perhaps from Valenciennes or Chantilly. More common, however, was a form of intricate embroidery known as whitework, where white thread was used to create beautiful, subtle patterns on the white fabric, swirling vines, delicate flowers, or a finely stitched royal monogram over the heart. This decoration was not for an audience. It was a private luxury, a testament to incredible craftsmanship, meant only for the wearer and their most intimate attendants. Over the nightgown, the monarch would wear a dressing gown, or robe de chambre. This was a garment of pure comfort and warmth, designed for lounging in the bedchamber before sleep or upon waking. The materials for these robes varied with the season and personal taste. In winter, a heavy enveloping robe of deep-hued velvet or thick quilted silk offered luxurious warmth. It might be lined with fur, such as sable or ermine, providing an unmatched sensation of softness and insulation. In warmer weather, the robe might be a lighter weight silk damask, with its beautiful woven patterns, or even a fine, soft Indian cotton, printed with exotic floral designs known as chintz. A particularly fashionable choice for a king was the banyan, a loose T-shaped gown inspired by Japanese kimonos, which signified a man of worldly taste and leisure. These dressing gowns were cut generously, designed to be wrapped around the body and secured with a soft sash. They allowed for complete freedom of movement. The simple act of putting on this soft, unstructured robe after a day spent in rigidly tailored clothing was a physical expression of relaxation, a signal to every muscle in the body that it was finally time to rest. An essential accessory for the night was the nightcap. In poorly heated palaces, an enormous amount of body heat was lost through the head. A nightcap was a practical necessity for staying warm. But for royalty, it was also another opportunity for exquisite craftsmanship. Made from the finest linen, cambric, or silk, they could be simple, close-fitting caps, or more elaborate creations adorned with lace, ruffles, and embroidery. A monarch would have dozens, all cared for as meticulously as the rest of their wardrobe. The final element of the night wardrobe was footwear. The formal, often uncomfortable shoes of the day were exchanged for soft, pliable slippers, known as pantofles. These were designed exclusively for indoor wear and were made with comfort as their only goal. They might be crafted from soft leather, velvet, or embroidered silk, with a lining of fur or soft wool for warmth. The soles were thin and flexible, allowing the feet to relax. To step out of a restrictive court shoe and into a soft, warm slipper was a small but deeply satisfying moment, the final step in casting off the formalities of the day. The care of this personal wardrobe was a meticulous ongoing ritual. The fine linens were laundered with the utmost care, using gentle soaps made from olive oil and water sourced from a rain cistern. It contained none of the harsh minerals that could damage the delicate fibers. They were dried in the sun and aired, never subjected to harsh heat. Lace was painstakingly cleaned, and any small tear or loose thread was immediately repaired by skilled seamstresses. This constant, quiet maintenance ensured that every night the garments presented to the monarch were in a state of perfect, comforting softness. Thus, dressed in layers of soft linen, warm wool, and smooth silk, the monarch was physically prepared for rest. The transition from the public uniform to the private wardrobe was more than just a change of clothes. It was a deeply symbolic act, a release from the rigid persona of the ruler into the simple, comfortable reality of a human being seeking rest. It was the final layer of the sanctuary, a personal cocoon of comfort to match the warm, quiet antechamber of sleep. I'm attended to the chamber and the wardrobe. The nightly ritual now turns to the final element of physical comfort, a gentle and nourishing repast. After a day that might have included a grand, multi-course banquet, a public affair of rich foods and ceremonial excess, the final meal taken in the privacy of the bedchamber was its complete opposite. This was not about sustenance for the body's labors, but about solace for the soul. It was a carefully considered offering, designed to soothe the stomach, warm the body, and gently signaled that the time for rest was near. As the hour grew late, a servant would bring a small silver tray to the royal chambers. The arrival of this tray was a quiet, anticipated moment. It carried not a feast, but a simple, warm, and thoughtfully prepared selection. Everything upon it, from the food itself to the vessels in which it was served, was chosen to promote a sense of calm and well-being. A favored choice across many European courts was a warm, spiced drink known as a caudle or a posset. Posset, particularly beloved in England, was a deeply comforting concoction. It was made by taking high-quality sweet wine, such as sack or a good ale, and heating it gently with spices like nutmeg, ginger, and cinnamon. To this warm, spiced liquid, hot milk was added, causing it to curdle. While this sounds unappealing to the modern ear, the result was a soothing, two-layered drink. The thin, warm, spiced whey would settle at the bottom, while a soft, creamy curd floated on top. It was served in a special two-handled posset pot, with a spout emerging from the bottom, allowing the drinker to sip the warm, comforting liquid, much like a modern latte. Soft curds could then be eaten with a spoon. This was the ultimate comfort food of its era, a warm, sweet, and nourishing brew believed to settle the stomach and ensure a sound sleep. A caudle was similar, but typically thickened with egg yolks, making it even richer and more custard-like. For those desiring something simpler, a cup of warm milk sweetened with honey and dusted with nutmeg was a timeless choice. But even this was prepared with ritual care. The milk was fresh, the honey often from the palace's own hives, and the nutmeg grated fresh from a whole kernel, releasing its fragrant, volatile oils. Herbal tisanes were also a central part of this nightly ritual. The knowledge of herbal remedies was extensive, and certain plants were universally prized for their calming properties. Chamomile, with its delicate apple-like scent, was known to soothe the nerves. Linden flowers from the linden tree produced a sweet, fragrant tea that was believed to promote a gentle drowsiness. Lemon verbena, with its clean, bright, citrusy flavor, was thought to aid digestion and calm a restless stomach. More potent remedies, like tea brewed from valerian root or passion flower, were also used for those suffering from true insomnia. These herbs, carefully dried and stored, would be infused in hot water in a delicate porcelain teapot, allowing their virtues to be gently extracted. The resulting tea was often served without any sweetener, a pure and simple taste of the garden's calming power. This gentle drink would often be accompanied by a small, light bite to eat. One of the most common was a small piece of toast. Not the simple toast of today, but a slice of fine, white manchat bread, toasted over the embers of the fire until it was perfectly crisp and golden. It might be served plain, or with a very light scraping of fresh sweet butter. Another favorite accompaniment was a simple, dry biscuit or wafer, sometimes flavored with a hint of rosewater or caraway seed. These were perfect for dipping into the warm posset or milk. For a monarch feeling slightly more peckish, a small bowl of clear broth might be served. This would be a rich, flavorful broth made by simmering chicken or beef bones for many hours, clarified to a beautiful, crystal-clear amber liquid. It was savory, warm, and deeply nourishing, yet light enough not to burden the digestive system before sleep. It was served hot in a two-handled porcelain cup to be sipped slowly. The presentation of this simple meal was as important as the food itself. It was always served on the finest silver with the most delicate porcelain, from Ormycin. A fine embroidered linen napkin would be folded neatly on the tray. This beautiful presentation transformed a simple snack into a moment of quiet ceremony. It was a final, deliberate act of care, reinforcing the idea that this private time was valuable and worthy of the same attention to beauty as any public event. The act of taking this evening repast was a slow and mindful process. The monarch would perhaps sit in a comfortable chair by the fire, sipping the warm liquid, taking a small bite of toast, and feeling the comforting warmth spread through their body. It was a quiet moment of reflection, a gentle punctuation mark at the very end of the day. This small, warm, and comforting ritual served as a final, powerful signal to the body and mind. It said that the day's work was done. The world was quiet, and now it was safe to rest. With the physical world now perfectly arranged for repose, the chamber warm, the air fragrant, the body clad in soft linens, the final and most subtle ritual could begin. This was the quieting of the mind. For a monarch whose thoughts were a constant tapestry of statecraft, diplomacy, and dynastic pressures, achieving a state of mental tranquility was a profound challenge. The evening hours were therefore dedicated to gentle pursuits, quiet pastimes designed to replace the complex worries of the day with a focused and peaceful harmony. Music was perhaps the most cherished of these calming arts. But this was not the grand performative music of the concert hall or the ballroom with its orchestras and virtuoso soloists. This was private, intimate music, a sonic environment crafted specifically for relaxation. A monarch would often retain a personal musician, a lutenist, or a player of the viola da gamba whose primary evening duty was not to entertain, but to soothe. The musician would typically play in an adjoining antechamber or a discreet corner of the bedchamber itself. The music they played was chosen for its gentle, contemplative qualities. For the lute, a favorite instrument since the Renaissance for its soft, resonant, and almost vocal tones, the repertoire would consist of slow, melancholic pavans, or intricate but peaceful fantasies by composers like John Dowland. The music was complex enough to hold the attention, yet serene enough to never be jarring. It was designed to wash over the listener, its interwoven melodies like a stream of pleasant thoughts. Later, in the Baroque era, the viola da gamba fretted. Bowed instrument held between the knees was prized for its deep, soulful, and mellow sound. The compositions of French masters like Marin Murray, with their long lyrical lines and rich, resonant chords, were the perfect soundtrack for slumber. This was not background music in the modern sense. It was a live, breathing performance, an offering of beauty intended to create a blanket of sound, muffling the monarch's own anxious thoughts and replacing them with a sense of order and grace. Reading was another essential evening pursuit. The tradition of being read to sleep is an ancient one, and for royalty, it was a cherished ritual. Trusted lady-in-waiting, a chaplain, or a dedicated reader with a clear and pleasant voice would be tasked with this duty. The selection of texts was telling. While a monarch might study history or philosophy during the day, the evening reading was for pleasure and escape.
I see.
Books of poetry were favorites, their rhythmic verse and elevated language creating a lulling cadence. Romances, with their tales of chivalry and courtly love, offered a gentle departure from the realities of political life. The physical book itself was often an object of profound comfort, bound in soft, supple calfskin leather, printed on thick, creamy paper, and sometimes adorned with gilded edges that would shimmer in the candlelight. The book was a sensory delight. The simple, repetitive act of listening to a steady voice, without the need to follow a complex plot, allowed the mind to drift. The story was less important than the sound, the gentle, monotonous rhythm of the human voice acting as a powerful, natural sedative. For those who preferred to be more active in their relaxation, there were other quiet hobbies. For a queen or princess, needlework was a deeply meditative practice. The slow rhythmic work of embroidery or lace making required a gentle focus that crowded out other thoughts. Seated in a comfortable chair by the fire, the repetitive motion of pulling a fine silk thread through linen, creating a beautiful, intricate pattern stitch by stitch, was a form of active meditation. The satisfaction of creating something beautiful with one's own hands provided a quiet sense of accomplishment and peace. The writing of personal letters was another common evening ritual. This was a chance to step away from the formal, dictated correspondence of the state and communicate with genuine affection to a beloved family member in a distant court. The slow, deliberate process of dipping a quill pen into a pot of ink, forming the elegant letters on a sheet of heavy paper, and expressing personal thoughts and feelings was a deeply cathartic and calming act. Finally, there was the simple, profound art of quiet contemplation. After the attendants had been dismissed, a monarch might spend a few moments alone, seated by the fire, simply watching the flames dance and crumble. In a life lived almost entirely in the company of others, these few minutes of true solitude were a rare and precious commodity. It was a time for silent reflection, for a final, peaceful ordering of one's thoughts before surrendering to the quiet darkness of the curtained bed. These were the moments when a king or queen was not a ruler, but simply a person. Alone with their thoughts, at the peaceful conclusion of the day, we now arrive at the heart of the sanctuary, the destination of all these rituals, the royal bed. This was not merely a piece of furniture. It was often the single most expensive and important object in the entire household, a symbol of status, lineage, and power. But in these quiet, final moments of the day, it shed its symbolic weight and became what it was truly designed to be, the ultimate vessel of comfort, a world within a world. Let us look past the magnificent carved frame and the rich hangings, and explore the complex, layered construction of its sleeping surface, an engineering marvel of softness. The foundation was not a solid platform, but a web of tightly woven ropes stretched across the bed frame. This rope support provided a surprising amount of flexible, yielding support, much like a modern sprung base. On top of this rope, lattice began the layers of mattresses. The first, lowest layer was a thick pallet filled with clean, fresh straw. This provided a firm, breathable base. Above this came the first true mattress, a thick bag of canvas filled with tightly packed wool. Wool was prized for its resilience and its ability to regulate temperature, providing warmth in winter and remaining relatively cool in summer. This wool mattress would be periodically unstitched, the wool inside washed, carded to fluff it up, and then restuffed. A laborious process that kept it clean and comfortable. Finally, on the very top was the mattress of pure luxury, the feather bed. This was an enormous linen bag filled with thousands of the softest goose or swan feathers. Door for the utmost in comfort, the incredibly light and insulating down from the eider duck. This feather bed was the cloud upon which the monarch would sleep. It was soft, enveloping, and incredibly warm. Upon this layered foundation, the bed was dressed. The bottom sheet of the finest Dutch linen or French cambric was laid over the feather bed. Then came blankets, not of synthetic materials, but of pure, soft, woven wool. Finally, a magnificent coverlet was spread on top. This might be a heavy silk quilt, its 2 layers of silk stitched together in an intricate pattern, with a light filling of wool or cotton in between, or a sumptuous velvet spread, so heavy that its weight alone provided a sense of security and comfort. The dressing of the bed culminated in the pillows. There were many, all filled with the same soft down as the feather bed, and encased in the same fine-scented linen. They were arranged not just for head support, but to create a soft, welcoming incline, a nest of pure comfort. The daily ritual of making this bed was a task for several servants. It involved removing all the layers, shaking out and airing the feather bed and the pillows to keep them fluffy, and then remaking the entire structure with fresh, immaculate linens. The final act was the turning down, where the top sheet and coverlet were folded back in a precise, elegant triangle, creating an unmistakable invitation to enter this haven of rest. To approach the bed in the evening was to approach a masterpiece of domestic craft, a space prepared with a level of care that bordered on reverence. As the monarch prepared to finally enter the great bed, the activity in the chamber would reach its quietest point. The musicians had fallen silent. The reader had closed their book. Most of the servants had long since withdrawn, leaving only 1 or 2 of the most trusted personal attendants, a high-ranking lady in waiting for a queen, or the first gentleman of the bedchamber or valet de chambre for a king. These were not mere servants. They were confidants, the quiet guardians who presided over the final, most intimate moments before sleep. Their tasks were small, precise, and performed with a practiced, unobtrusive grace. One final steadying hand might be offered as the monarch stepped onto the small set of stairs or the footstool required to climb into the high bed. Once the monarch was settled comfortably amongst the pillows, the attendant would perform the final checks of the room. They would approach the fireplace, using a brass screen to safely contain the glowing embers for the night. They would ensure the candles in the room were placed safely away from any drafts or fabrics, or extinguish all but one, leaving a single, small flame burning in a protected lantern as a nightlight. This single candle, known as the veilleuse, provided just enough of a gentle glow to navigate the room if needed, without disturbing sleep. The last act was the drawing of the bed curtains. This was a moment of quiet ceremony. The attendant would move to each corner of the great bed, taking the heavy velvet or damask curtains and drawing them fully closed, enclosing the monarch in their private fabric-walled chamber. The sound of the last curtain ring sliding shut was the final sound of the waking world. These attendants were the keepers of the threshold between the monarch's public life and their private rest. Their presence was one of quiet reassurance. They were a guarantee of security and comfort, ensuring that their royal charge could surrender to sleep without a single worldly concern. With a final, silent bow or curtsy to the curtained darkness, they too would withdraw, leaving the chamber in the care of the fire's dying glow and the deep, profound silence of the palace at night. And so, within the warm, dark, silent world of the curtained bed, the monarch was finally alone. The weight of the crown, the burdens of state, the endless performance of royalty all were left outside the velvet walls of this small private kingdom. Here there was only the scent of lavender from the linen, the soft pressure of the down mattress, and the gentle, even rhythm of one's own breathing. The creation of a physical sanctuary, the gentle art of scent, the comfort of the wardrobe, the warmth of a nourishing drink, and the peace of a quiet melody together. These rituals formed a nightly masterpiece of serenity. They were a carefully constructed pathway, leading from the complex world of power to the simple, human need for rest. In a life of immense public duty, European royalty understood that the greatest luxury of all was a quiet mind and a peaceful night's sleep. Their evening rituals were a testament to this search for tranquility, creating a nightly haven of calm that allowed them to rest, recharge, and rise with the sun to meet the morning. It was in these quiet, forgotten moments that they found the strength to rule. A true royal repose,